Oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, why don't we change that? Internet of Things, lighting control. Okay, so we are in the right place. I want to thank everybody for coming today. Thank you for coming and attending LEDucation. A little housekeeping is that this program will be put on the website, and you'll be able to access it. LEDucation.org. You will also ask to be reporting on the program. We think these are great programs. Somebody like Beatrice is here to just explain it and give some feedback and let us know if you like the program, what else you would like to see, make changes. Your credits will be available. They'll be mailed to you. Just go on the website as well. And a little bit of introduction to Beatrice. Beatrice Witzgal, am I doing a good job on your name? Is an accomplished lighting designer with years of worldwide experience. She worked on a variety of lighting design projects with renowned architects such as Frank Gehry, yay, Stephen Hull. As a German-trained architect with a master's from Technical University of Braunschweig and studies at RISD, she was driven by how technology transforms and influences the space. While her primary focus is hospitality and super yachts. You going to talk about super yachts? Tell a little bit about that. She has worked on residential, commercial, and institutional projects. And in 2010, Beatrice received the Lumen Award for her contribution to the Lincoln Center, Alice Tully Hall, and Juilliard School. Witzgal entered lighting in 1998. She's a young'un. In 2000, she collaborated with the MIT Media Lab. In 2002, she taught at Parsons School of Design Responsive Architecture. She joined the world-renowned lighting design boutique firm L'Observatoire, and Beatrice firm founded Lumify in 2014, a wireless lighting control solution for home, consumer, and hospitality spaces. So with that great introduction of who she is, Beatrice, please tell us a lot more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, first of all, for the great introduction. I'm also very honored to have Bob introduce me because he was one of the first people putting LEDucation up, and I think, it shows kind of the paradigm shift on how the technology and the industry is changing. 10 years ago, it was all about LEDs, but LEDs was an opening door for a much bigger universe and of possibilities and technology, and that's why we're here today. We all are now living in a connected world, obviously, and things are changing around us. So typically I try to ask some questions, trying to see, who is in the audience, because it's such a wide topic and we can talk about so many different aspects. So I wanted to kind of get a sense, some basic questions. Who has a smartphone here? Great, perfect. So who made in the last year a call from a landline? Good. So who made a photo with a real analog camera? The ones with the film in the last year? Good, so we are now at down to 10%. So, and who made a photo with your smartphone in the last week? 100% almost, I think. So I think you get the point. We are in a new area. Things are changing, and it's the whole new connected world. And now what we have to look at is, what does this now mean for we are all in the 21st century now. What does that mean for the lighting industry? And how does this now change us as an industry? We have this Internet of Things. We all embrace it in our everyday life, but what does it mean for lighting? And it's kind of going through a big transformation right now, and I often like to compare it to the Kodak moment of lighting. Because we all know we had all the analog cameras, we took our photos, but now it's all this. And there are so many possibilities out there what this technology can bring us that we can't even imagine at this point. So, but we're still building up the infrastructure around that, and trying to understand, what does this technology bring us? So if you're looking at some, big picture, first of all, Internet of Things, what are the key drivers? I mean, it's obviously almost, I think, from the numbers I saw about lighting controls in 2012 or 13, it was like a $1 or $2 billion business, but now it's going to increase tremendously because there are new features and functionalities that are going to drive this whole system. It's not just that it lowers the price point, but it also goes through a whole new sense of new applications that we couldn't do with a traditional wired control system before. And that's really exciting. And we have also new ideas. So there's a lot more possibility out there, and it's a big opportunity if we start embracing the technology and understand what that means. So if you're looking at the traditional technology versus what can IoT now bring us, you have very expensive, complicated systems that need to be all wired up. And they're very inflexible, and we often have long planning phases. You cannot just go into a space like I can do right now and just unscrew the bulb and screw it back in. It really is like often a two-year process to get a lighting control system in place, and it requires a lot of experts who do planning, who do installations, who do programming. It's not very intuitive, and it's a closed system. And we have our smartphone everywhere with us, and there's no overlap. Meanwhile, if you're going wireless, there are a lot of more pros out there than some cons, but they really outweigh what it can do. I mean, first of all, it's very easy, flexible to do. You don't need wiring anymore. You can go into a space without any delay and refit a space with a control system. It's open. It's often very easy DIY. You can do it almost yourself in many instances because you just don't need to have an electrician or a contractor involved anymore to install it. And the biggest thing is it becomes now a software-based system. So it's the big paradigm shift that lighting controls go from a hardware-based system to a software system. And that means we can get new functionality by just adding them, sending them over the air, over a new update. I don't need to have somebody go into a space, install a new piece of hardware with electricians and often stopping operation of business. I just launch it over the internet. It's an automated update, and you have a new feature and functionality. And that's just the beginning. So that's very exciting. And then lighting itself from the application design point is going also through a transition. We have now, traditionally lighting was always about function. We needed light to work, but now it's really hospitality is going about how do you create an atmosphere? How do you create an emotional connection with a space? How do you feel in a space? And how do you animate a space? And now we had so many great talks over the last 2 days about also how does lighting really affect your biology, your well-being, with tunable light, the circadian rhythm studies. But how do we really implement them? How can we make lighting dynamic, especially tunable light, if you're really looking at the whole spectrum and how we need to change to really bring some of these benefits of this amazing research into real-world application? Traditional systems are often really not capable of doing that and saying, I can animate this light scene from a cold white to a warm white over 3 hours and then going back. Oh, no, it's not actually 3 hours. It's personal to you because you just traveled from Germany to New York, and actually we need to now shift it and make it personal to you. Wired system cannot give you these capabilities. So let's look at comparing some of the system to get you a little bit of an overview. So the traditional systems, of course, are they are the elephant in the room. They are all clued in with every hardware that is out there, with the whole ecosystem. They have a schedule manager, multi-rooms, all what we know. They have the traditional switches. And then what I found the most amazing thing is they still have a piece of hardware for an astrological clock. I was a couple of weeks ago in a conversation with one of the big lighting companies, and I asked them, what do you do for your astrological clock? And they're like, oh, it's a piece of hardware. We're selling it for a couple $100. And I'm like, why? I have my astrological clock right here. It's software. You don't need hardware for an astrological clock anymore. You just have a piece of hardware. It goes with you. If I go to Germany, I have my astrological clock with me. Why buy a piece of hardware anymore? So I think that's just the beginning where things are shifting, where software really is going to substitute hardware, and where the whole intelligence moves into software and away from somebody meticulously spending hours hand programming something that's inflexible. And what I try to do here is also looking at, the whole smart home features, the mobile apps, what do they bring? They bring me now the personal control on my own personal phone, and I can change a light scene on the WIMP just by going into my app here and going to a color wheel and changing it right here. I don't need to call a programmer up anymore. Oh, my lights are too bright. Can you just go 10 down? And I'm out my $1,500 for his day rate. So I think there's a lot of flexibility in there, and I can also now do scheduling from my phone. How I have my alarm on my phone to wake me up. I can do the same with lights. I don't need to have complicated programming. But that's just the basic features. And now with the whole new features in IoT, we can build more things up. I was at the speakers dinner. I had a great conversation with somebody of a traditional control system or theatrical control system. And he was like, oh, never give your client software in their hands. They can screw things up. And I'm like, why not? I'm like, we all have software every day in our hand. Here, we want to have an app. We want to have this service at our hand. And now what I can do with IoT or the whole software universe is I can give permission and user roles. So I can say to my guest, oh, you just want to change the light scenes. Here is your login, or scan this code. And then you can just change the light scenes. Or I can give you a login and say, okay, you're the IT integrator. You can actually change IP addresses and do all the technical parameters. And oh, you're my property operator. You're my general manager of this hotel. All what you want to do is you want to change the schedule. Here's your login permission, and you can do that. I think that's really interesting because people want to have control. And traditionally, in traditional lighting controls, you don't give the users, the end users, control in their hand. And that's now really possible. Another really fascinating thing that what is also another possibility with wireless or Internet of Things controls is you can have the software configure themselves according to the application. So if I have a hotel corridor, all I want is my morning, daytime, afternoon mood. If I'm in a residential space or in a shop space, I want to have other features. If I'm in a hotel room, I want to have my sleep timer, my wake-up alarm. In a corridor, I want my schedule manager with astrological clock. In the back end, I can now just click a box. You have this functionality. I give it to you. I send you an over-the-air update, or you're just scanning the code, and you have this now available at your hands. That means we can now start to create user interfaces that are tailored to a person and to an application and make it really accessible. And I think that's really giving the designers, the end users, and the clients a whole new level of control into their hands. And that's just the beginning. Another thing that can be really nicely done now is color changing, color tuning, and dimmable light is what we always had. But so far, if you wanted to have a color change, which is great for many applications to bring highlights in, some motion, special occasions, or the tunable white with the whole well-being aspects, the controls were expensive and complicated. You had a piece of DMX software, and now it's all a chip in here. I can make these lights easily color changing and changing just over the air. It's very, very simple. So before we go into some of the user cases, I want to kind of explain what is a wireless or IoT-enabled control system. How does it look? It's software. Welcome to the new world. It's not hardware. We don't need a closet, IT closet, where we need to have the architect build an extra room for all that hardware in there that we spent thousands of dollars on. That's going to be antiquated a couple years later. It's software, and we can do over-the-air updates. So we have now the mobile interface that can be very flexible, tailored to personal needs, to specific functionalities. And right now, what you have typically seen, I suppose we have a clicker here, is in the smart home, you have the software directly talk to the hardware. In a more enterprise-level system, you have a little bit more because we're saving the settings in the cloud. We can also give a management platform on the web interface where we can say, okay, you can go and change your schedule for the property right from your web interface, like an Outlook interface. And then we added also a piece of software on site that kind of does monitoring and re-triggers commands. And the role of this controller software or on the device, I'm going to talk later on when we go through the case studies why this is important to have. On the hardware side, I think you have a whole new universe starting. You have a lot of different hardware coming to market and different protocols everything from Zigbee and Bluetooth, and you can combine them now in software. So all what I have here as my controller is basically my little smartphone and 2 gateways, and I have a Bluetooth light here and a Zigbee light, and I can control them very easily through my interface right here. And you see we have now these lights. We even specified what the dimming factor is of 2 seconds, so you see a little bit softer going down. And it's a very simple interface, and you can give it around, you can play around. I can also change the colors over here, very simple, of my color changing light. As you see, I can save that as a preference and personalize my light mode. I don't need a, sorry to say, I don't know how many installers we have in here, but I can do it myself. It's incredible empowering for the industry that you have now control to create the spaces at your fingertips, and that you can also give your clients the control into your hands. Of course, you can limit it, should limit it in many cases, which we can do, but it's really, really amazing. You know, it's like very simple, as you can see, and I can change the whole group, and it's just right here. I don't have, you know, it's color changing, it's dimming, it's Bluetooth, it's Zigbee, all in one interface, and I don't have much hardware there. I have this little box there that's kind of just the translator from Zigbee basically to Wi-Fi signal. So that's very simple, and whoever wants, or like we can also pass this around so you can play around with it a little bit and see how it works. So now I was asked to talk about applications and the experiences when we started to deploy like a real wireless system, not just a wireless system where you have the phone talk to a wired system, which is often being mistaken at. And I want to look at the applications. One of the big topics is tunable light, obviously, and the whole circadian rhythm. But it means actually you actually need to program lights in a circadian curve. And that's, again, software that does that. So what we've started doing is actually an application that I never thought of, but I had clients come to us, can you do our corridor? Hotel corridor is one of the most boring spaces ever. Nobody ever wants to spend time there. But it's a really interesting application when you look at it for tunable light or circadian rhythm. You have travelers coming, dealing with jet lag. You have a boring space, but you can really start to animate it throughout the day from, you know, a more brighter awake mood with colder whites to the evening, ambers, warm whites, dimmer mood. And then what is also really fun is having colors or color highlights for special occasion. This is done in a hotel just a couple blocks here. And in the penthouse floor, we have color changing lights. So there is the penthouse door on the left door, and they have events, all the time events. You never find your door. So we're going to put, you know, event time. We're going to put the wall sconces next to the door in a color. Everybody finds it. It always becomes something interesting and fun. We also had like clients say, can you do for our lobby Cancer Awareness Month or Christmas? And they can just put the highlights in there, and all what they need to do is going on their phone and select the light scene, and it changes, or they can do it themselves. Before I want to talk a little bit about the benefits also of wireless lighting controls, but I know people also wanted to have me talk about when we are deploying a system, what are the problems that we encounter or the issues, because we're now deploying a different system. You know, while in a wired system, the whole space goes out of commission, you need to wire. Every system has their process that we need to take a look at. If you're doing a wireless system, dealing with the Wi-Fi network of the property is, I think, a key component. If you're looking at commercial properties, you have firewalls to deal with. And so what we developed is over the time, while we were in conversations with these network providers, is really an IT checklist on how to navigate the firewalls, because obviously security is a big concern. But if you trust it proper, it can be very well managed. What we also saw is that sometimes the Wi-Fi protocols have a little bit of unresponsiveness going on. And while we were deploying this, we also learned on how to overcome that. And that's why we ended up having that little controller I saw earlier. There might be sometimes a delay, and you can, with the controller, just re-trigger the bulb, and you can basically monitor the status of the bulb if it's online or not. And then if it's offline, not only can you send an alert to like, oh, your bulb might be broken, or you can re-trigger it and see if it works. Or what we actually also want on our other applications is people are starting to steal bulbs, which is also very fun. So we can also go and send an alert like, hey, check on that bulb, is it still there? And then what we also saw in this application is that the client really loved the idea that, oh, we can change now our lighting mood ourselves, and it's just not a button. We can do color and changes depending on the event. But what was really fun is then we created this web interface because they wanted to change the schedule. You know, some hotels or some properties never want to touch it, but now if you gave them the possibility to change and adjust things, they were actually proactively doing it with the web interface. So in the dialogue, we realized, you know, these are the problems, how do we overcome them? And then clients came to us with new features and ideas to do it. So let's also look at the price point of a wireless system. So these are real numbers for 5 corridors with 100 lights. And we priced out a traditional system and another system. And what is really interesting, while many have maybe concerns about a wireless system, oh, it might not be secure or this and that. If you really look at the return of investment, if you do a conversion from an incandescent bulb, which was the corridor before, it was a 60-watt incandescent. They had tried LED, they had tried compact fluorescent, it never gave the color temperature that they liked. They went back to 60-watt incandescent. And then with our system, with having a tunable white bulb or color-changing bulb, they got the color quality they wanted, but they got humongous energy savings on top of that. So the ROI on a wireless system suddenly became, for that specific property, around 1 year. So you're having either no control and just on and off, or you're adding control, you still get the quality of light, you have automation, and you have actually making after a year money on your energy savings. And if you look at the ROI of a traditional wired system, and what is not considered is the 5 days of business interruption in this mask, you never have an ROI because it never really balances out with the energy savings. So it's kind of really interesting to look at it that way. We also did an energy study for that corridor or for that property that you saw earlier, and if you look at that, this is really now, when we're looking at an incandescent system, how much does it cost in New York? You know, quite a bit of money a year. Now we're putting it on dimming automation, and we know the numbers are not quite right because it's based on a linear curve. We all know the dimming is actually a little bit different. So it's kind of a worst case scenario, but in a conversion of a incandescent project to an LED with controls, we are saving them 91% on their yearly energy savings. So that's really kind of interesting for a lot of hotels to look at what benefits can control give us also on a monetary level. And it's not just the discussion about like, oh, new technology, all the concerns. There's real money also to be saved because automation has its own benefits. So I want to talk about a little bit of a different project that we also did here in the city. It was also a corridor project. And it was, again, interesting enough. Again, we had the whole daytime, evening time, special occasion mood, afternoon, and went through the whole dimming cycle. But it was really also fun to see when we did the deployment, the property had as a refurb possibility, we have either money for carpet or for lighting. And then when we put our pilot floor in there, they're like, oh, with the right lighting, we're actually hiding all the old carpet errors. Like how can we ever think of something like this? But lighting has an effect on the whole environment. So it was really, really fun. This project was a little bit more challenging because of the layout, and we really started to deal with distance issues of a Wi-Fi system, So every Wi-Fi system has a little bit of a different range issues depending on the technology you're using. This was a Zigbee project. And of course, we have a big, fat elevator core in the center with a lot of steel. And of course, the IT closet where we are supposed to put our little bridge in was also made out of steel. So we had a few interesting things to overcome, which was like finding actually the physical location of that little bridge or repeater with the Wi-Fi network. Not having that at the beginning, we had problems with getting the signal across evenly, so some bulbs didn't respond. But we did also overcome that, so I'm just saying these are experiences. When you're deploying a system like this, you're going to have challenges. It's not always going to work right away, but it's how you solve it. And then, so we had some unresponsive bulbs. I'm going to say in the next slide how we overcame that. And then this was the client who was like, oh, can you do pink for cancer awareness? oh, it's Christmas time coming up, can you do Christmas colors in the into the lobby? And I think the moment the clients had actually access to being more playful and experience light, a lot more functionalities came up. Another thing that we started to develop with this project, it had 31 floors. And how do you deploy 31 floors of almost like the same layout? So we actually developed a system of templates. So we have the podium with like 45 lights, and then the tower with 20 lights. So we developed templates, and what is really nice is we created a layered infrastructure between project settings, template settings, and individual space settings. So now with our web interface, you can actually tell the hotel client, oh, you want to change your light setting in your complete hotel, in your night setting from 30 to 20%. They can go onto the web interface on their own desktop and just say, change my project setting. And then it happens for the complete property. If you think about this as an ongoing kind of situation and maintenance in a traditional system, how would you do that? You know, you're going into your laptop, into the basement, you're calling up your IT installer, and then you basically have to reprogram every single thing, and, you know, he's sitting there a couple of days. And, or hours, however, you know. So it's you have this kind of user interaction that really changes dramatically how people play with lighting or experiences and how you can change settings. And I think at the end of the day, what we are doing here as a lighting community, we want to give our users the tools to interact with lighting better, because that educates them too, and that also drives our market. Because if they just take a status quo as acceptance, like, is this lighting really great for presentation? No, but we don't have a choice. We accept it. But if we have the tools in our hands, we can improve how we interact with lighting and how people use the space. So here's now a little bit of the technical problems that we solved and have overcome. I talked about the bulb responsiveness issue that you often have in a wired system. This was a Zigbee project. So what you see in the diagram is actually, oh, I thought we brought the Zigbee repeater. We have a Zigbee repeater here. So it's a little device where we can actually read the channels, the Wi-Fi channels. And you see it's very busy in the center. And that was the default channel where the lights were. We ended up changing the channel to channel, I think, 21 or something. And that meant actually we lost all the responsiveness issues, because we went from a busy channel to an unbusy channel, and it was resolved that way. There were other issues, you know, and we had also other plans with the controller. Even if there was a delay, we could re-trigger the signal, and we had the same responsiveness going on. So people are always saying, oh, range is a big issue when you have a wireless deployment, but there are ways to overcome it if you start to drill down. Another thing that we actually also realized when we were deploying more bulbs is the way the signals are sent. They are sent as packages. So if you have, and how you are coding these packages, how these signals are being sent to the bulb, also often create some delays. So it's really then how do you code it in a way that these signals are really packaged in a way that you can minimize the delays. And that's, you know, very software specific. And I think also, like, and that's my point at the end of it, it's really about the hardware manufacturers should focus on the hardware, and they should partner up with software people who understand how to do these little tiny things in the code to make that efficient working, where it becomes really about each other's complementary skills. So that's kind of one of the problems there. Here we had another hotel suite problem. So the problems we had during the deployment of that wireless system was basically we were also a refit situation, so we can go in there. It takes us typically like 2 hours to basically do this. And our biggest problem that we couldn't find an Ethernet port on a floor to like hide this little white box in. So this needs to have an Ethernet access here. And so we only found an Ethernet port on the floor below, which then ended up being out of range. But then we figured out with a repeater and a cable that we did find one, and then we were within range. But that was, during that project, one of our biggest problems. And then the second, when it was running, what we saw, bulbs disappeared. It was very funny. So the cleaning lady moved the lamp to another room or something, and some guests took some, and so that's also why we had the controller then, who's now monitoring. If a bulb is not there, we can kind of keep track of it and do also inventory tracking. And then what we also saw is, as an experience, people were actually playing with the lights, so they changed the settings. And it was very fun when, like, you know, and we needed to implement actually a reset mechanism after every guest was leaving the room, which then housekeeping had to do because, like, suddenly lights turned red, and it was fun to see that, you know, now that you gave the users the ability to change the lighting or set a schedule. We had another project where somebody set a schedule at 2 a.m. and the next guest came in and was like, my light's turning on at 2 a.m. You know, so we kind of realized, okay, people do interact with the lighting when you give them the tool, and they play and experience it around, and then you like encounter new problems you haven't thought of, and so we had to do a default reset after every guest checks out, which again was software, can be triggered from reception or somewhere else, or housekeeping. So that was one of our experiences that we had in that. And another very interesting thing that's really coming up is we're always talking about the role of the switch. You know, traditionally we have our light switch, and not everybody wants to put an app up to control lights. Point taken, but what now this whole new technology is going to change is voice and other ways to sense presence and automation. So I think it's really interesting now with voice coming into play, how you can also interact with lighting in a complete different way. And this whole technology is really, we are changing our relationship to light and how we experience light and interact with light, and that's really exciting aside from the technology aspect. So what you see here is, you know, it's a hotel suite, and you really see how now the light actually changes in the room, and people can actually experience how powerful light is, because typically they don't see it unless it's a hospitality space and everything is perfectly curated. So it's really like the moment they experienced light, they were impressed and they learned and they became aware of it. And what was for us really impressive was like the simplicity and the speed of the install process. You know, we go in there and we can do a room within like half an hour basically, or less, you know, or housekeeping, exchange the bulbs. And also, how do you do the deployment process? I don't have a slide in that, but I can talk a little bit about it. So what we really looked at is we have now the web platform where we kind of create these templates. So we pre-configure everything from our office. We don't even need to get up. We're like looking at the plans. Okay, you have 42 bulbs here. And then anybody can, if you're having, you know, replacement bulb technology, housekeeping can exchange the bulbs. If you have wired fixture, it's of course a different one. But then how do you deploy a system like this? All what we need to do is we're scanning again our code that loads our template in our phone, and then we're basically just doing a mapping process. So you have now a physical light that sits downlight XYZ or something, and then you're going basically in the space. I need to, what did you take the phone? Who has the phone? Can you just click onto the bulb and make one of the lights blink? So what happens is we can now in the app basically make a bulb blink, and then we say, oh, you're the bulb next to that door, you're that table lamp, and all what we do in the deployment process is actually mapping this IP address to a physical location. So if you like, and then, you know, and you have already the names pre-configured, so just like a mapping situation, and that's basically how you deploy a wireless system. You have somebody install the fixtures, you have a range of, you have your pre-configured space, you have the IP addresses, and then it's somebody in the physical space who's just matching them. You know, you like have this blink, oh, that's that one, great. So it's a different way on how you now deploy a project like this, but you can also simplify and create tools to make that a lot quicker and easier. So this is another project we did. And what was really interesting is we actually had an interaction with a traditional wired control system, which were all the downlights, the switches, but then the hotel, and that's a big trend also in hospitality and also hospitals right now. We got some requests for hospitals right now, is that people want to also control from their bed or from their phone or from a device. Like this hotel has an Android device that also does housekeeping or ordering food, spa services from their Android device, that we can control the lights from there. And it was really interesting to do this kind of integration with a traditional system that controlled the switches and the downlights. And then we added the whole color changing layer to it and the mobile aspect and the whole user experience. And that they now also could set schedules. You know, that was our 2 a.m. situation. And it's really kind of interesting and nice that you can do that. And you see now that, and we have these people coming with these requests, or we really want to have this on our personal phone, like the hospitals, like, or elderly who cannot get up from their bed, and, there is some other device that they can bring to it, and you can transfer the settings to them, and you don't rely on the switch anymore and can do it differently. So these are some of the lessons that we learned during the deployment processes along. I think it's like with wireless lighting, it's always depends a little bit on the wireless process, but it's how you manage them and the type of signal programming. I think you can all manage that and overcome that. I think if you're doing a refit project with having hardware, a bulb now color changing $60 or something, it's different when you do downlights or something. Things disappear more, so you're doing some inventory tracking and also monitoring their statuses, which also can feed into energy monitoring and tracking. Is really interesting to do. I think the whole space requirements is becoming interesting because you go from these big closets to I just need to have one little small gateway box somewhere on the floor. It's interesting, but then, I need one of these boxes need an IP address, and how do you manage the firewall settings, which is the next one. These are kind of the things that you encounter in a deployment, but you have to just work through it. And then we saw really that with interacting with the property managers that they wanted more tools, and that's why we developed the web platform. And then how do you streamline the deployment process? And I think that's where we are right now in the learning curve, because it is a different process and a different understanding around that. And now the most interesting part is the business model and the responsibilities are going to change with a new system like that. It's different. And how do you charge for that? We're coming now, we're transitioning now from a hardware-based business to software. But who wants to pay software? Everybody expects it comes for free. But the logic, the intelligence is actually in software, and it shouldn't be free, because that's where the value actually is. And the hardware can be, sorry to say, some say it's a race to the bottom line. It's pricing or this and that. But the value-added stuff is now happening in software. And how is the business model responding to that? And what we've also found in all of our deployments was software is always a SaaS model, a license fee model, a monthly, but real estate projects are really running on CapEx, tax write-offs, one-time license fees. How do you manage this kind of, conflict in a project in deploying that? And what we figured out in conversations with a lot of clients, it's probably a hybrid model, that you need to have minimal functionalities as a one-time license fee, that is coupled to the bulb, and then you have additional features like analytics, alerts, all these things, and you can do that on a SaaS model. But it's a little bit on how we define now how this whole universe comes together between hardware and software, and then also deployments. And this is kind of, so what we kind of saw, how it needs to change. And of course, it's always hard, in the people's mindset that's set to something to think about. Now we're really in a new kind of area of controls. And then another big question is also responsibilities. If a system doesn't work, who's going to get called? What's the problem? Where's the problem? And I think, the system stakeholders are really still the hardware people, and now the software people. And defining the responsibilities between the two stakeholders, I think, is a critical aspect that needs really an engagement on both sides. The way it's traditionally done and the way we kind of solved it also towards the client, we have compatibility matrices. We all know that this system is compatible with this version, and you as a client, you're going to buy that version, and then you can decide if you want to do a version upgrade or not. But what now happens is, if you're having a bulb manufacturer who has now a Wi-Fi chip inside the bulb, this is called a firmware, they run firmware updates. And the firmware update can ultimately break the system. So now you need to really have a system in place where you coordinate these upgrades or updates so that you don't by accident break the system. It happened to us with one manufacturer who we are releasing a new firmware update, and suddenly nothing was working anymore, and everybody didn't sleep for 3 nights. And now we got a need to put on our software and also measurements to say, okay, if you're doing a firmware update, we need to manage that. We first need to check the client, do you really want to have that upgrade, yes or no? And then if that update happens, what does it mean? Can it break? And you have to have, you need to look after that. That's kind of where the software and the hardware people need to come together and talk about it. And then with the deployment, I think you have still the IT installers who will play a big role in deploying these systems, who need to learn about that. You have hotel staff can take a big, or like property staff can also take a lot of the load up because it's now different. You don't need so much wiring anymore. And then I think also the lighting designer is actually more empowered than ever before because they can now create the experiences themselves. I mean, like I've spent years at nighttime with my programmer on their laptop saying, hey, 10 up, 10 down on a walkie-talkie, running around like, oh no, wrong, or like, can you save? You come the next day back, programmer not there, you're like, oh, this is all wrong, I want to change. I don't need this anymore. I go around with my mobile and say, okay, this is nice, I like it, hit save, It really empowers us as designers too. So that's kind of the whole stakeholder thing, and I think what I want to also talk about, not just the lessons, but really also how software and hardware manufacturers need to step up to the game, because it's now different. So far, hardware and controls were always separate. You have your controller somewhere by a control company, it's still that piece of hardware. But if you're really looking at the example of the phone, do we now walk around with our camera and our phone separated? No, it's one. So what now needs to happen, or is happening already with several manufacturers, is they're putting that wireless radio. It doesn't matter if it's a Zigbee radio, a Bluetooth radio, a Janet IP radio, that kind of wireless radio that they're putting it next to their LED, next to their driver, wherever they want to put it in, and take also control over that as part of their thing. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a really interesting conversation with someone who was like, oh, he saw all of this and was saying like, oh, 10 years ago when LED started, manufacturers needed to shift. They needed to have now an optical engineer as part of their team. I'm like, that's a great analogy. Now when you're going to wireless control, you should have somebody also on the hardware manufacturer side to say, okay, how do we manage that wireless module as part of the LED? And that should actually also become then responsibility of the hardware manufacturer, that they start adopting this and understanding to not only like there's this whole range of possibility, but how can they also be part of this, and what responsibilities should they take part of, becoming part of this universe? Because it's not just like, oh, controls is somebody else. Like, it's not a camera that I have in the hand here. The camera and the phone were combined into one device, and I think that's also something that the lighting industry now goes through. You have your LED, you have your wireless chip. Together they become a unit. And that's so powerful, as you see here, Bluetooth and Zigbee together, all working wirelessly in one unison, creating new experiences that people can interact in a new way as never before. So this is kind of, I can go over the lessons, but I think we are in an exciting time. We have different technologies, we can bring them together. And it's about the communication and the openness between the hardware manufacturers, also to create partnerships with the software people, because there are different skill sets to come together. And it's about embracing this new technology, because it can open up new possibilities that we all haven't thought about. Did we 10 years ago think about we're doing a selfie culture? Not really, but now it's there. Okay, thank you very much. I think we have 10 minutes for questions. So I think it depends with every project, like what is the budget and the quality that the client wants. At this point, we are still limited by the hardware on the market, so we have to also pick applications with the hardware that's available on the market. That's obviously changing drastically with even like LED module manufacturers now adapting Bluetooth modules that you can see here. So the hardware universe will open up a lot more. And then you go to your regular client as your lighting designer or consultant, say, okay, what's your application, what is the light, and then these are right now Wi-Fi enabled available, what do you want to pay, do you want dimming, do you want color changing, tunable white, here is the price, and then you do it. The customization, it's just setting up a project, it's some clicks on the back end of the software, it's not that it's brain surgery anymore, where you need to spend hours and days programming anything anymore. That's gone, That kind of is a thing of the past if the software is proper set up. You just need to go and say, okay, you have this application, you want these functionalities, astrological clock, check mark, sleep timer, check mark, oh no, you don't want to have wake up timer, check mark away, and then the software configures itself. So it's not a very complicated process really in that aspect. But it's about the specification industry saying, okay, we want to have, or the client, a Wi-Fi enabled system, we want to have dimming, color changing, a tunable white, what are the price differences, and then they make their decision.
Do you find, the system available from the market interface, like, Samsung smart things, do you find the application available from off the shelf be satisfactory for your project? Do you think that it has to do a lot of customization to implement it in the hotel?
The smart things IT infrastructure is not made for a scalable deployment. It's basically limited to 50 bulbs. So part of what the software infrastructure has to be built to be scalable. So do we use off-the-shelf bulbs? Are these here one of the ones that you can find in every Apple store, Home Depot, or whatever? No, they were not allowed to call names. Yes, we can use off-the-shelf hardware simply and go into a property and refit it with a replacement bulb technology tomorrow. It's very simple. The software, as smart things, it's a home consumer based. They don't have the scalability aspect, or even if you use the Philips Hue hardware, that's limited to 50 bulbs because they cannot manage multiple gateways or multiple manufacturers. So you really do need to go to a software provider that does more an enterprise solution.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
In your slide on protocols, you did not mention an ocean, and that was really cool for a minute. We could deploy not only wireless controls, but self-powered controls, no batteries, zero maintenance. I did a project like that, which was great. Now I don't see it anymore. What's going on?
Not too much. Actually, I don't know really, and I think what I kind of picked up on in Ocean, it's not really part of the IoT universe that you can go completely into the whole smartphone, mobile software part, but it's also like where the resources are of the software providers and manufacturers and how they play with each other. So I'm not completely an expert on an Ocean. I'm familiar with it, but I don't know why they are now not developing. But I think the power is now, it depends what radio it is. I think, an Ocean technology is really a combination. But what IoT really right now means is a different means of communicating. So you have a Wi-Fi chip, and that can be, like, what are the Wi-Fi chips? An Ocean is not a radio, it's not a protocol. You have Bluetooth as a protocol. Zigbee is a protocol where, it's 802.15.4 as your channel. You need to look at the protocol. It's a communication protocol of a wireless sort, and an Ocean is really kind of a package with energy and other things, as far as I understand. So,
No, I think an Ocean is a wireless communications
Yeah.
protocol. It was designed so that the client could be lightweight and require very little power to communicate, which enabled this whole self-powered control market when Zigbee is lacking in that department. So I'm just curious what's going on. Leviton had a great product line called LEDnet, and they switched from an Ocean to Zigbee, and I don't understand why.
I'm not an expert. I don't know much on an Ocean. I don't want to speculate. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Any other questions?
I have another question.
Can we first, the person who haven't asked?
How do you deal with safety concerns, setting minimum light levels so that they, can't accidentally black out the corridor? If they're playing with colors that can do a red and green, can the colorblind person still find the exit? If I come into the hotel room and it's 1 a.m. for my flight to delay and I just want to go to sleep, can I just go to sleep and not learn a lighting system first?
Good.
Deal with that sort of stuff.
Good, multiple questions. Let's first, this is a safety concern. You can give us a specifier the settings, and we can set in the system never go below 10%. that's very simple. You know, we had like, because corridors have some of the security concerns, we had that. We had like one lobby project, the Ace Hotel, they're like, if my lobby by accident goes red, I will be fired. You can't have that. You know, the beauty on software is you build that restriction in there. That's what I said, you know, earlier. The permissions and the roles is really a powerful tool in that aspect, where you say, okay, my light should never be minimum of 10%, which equals 5-foot candles, for example. You know, depends on what manufacturer or what fixture type you have. So that's just a setting in the software where you can specify, I want to have that. Like this Bluetooth here module is actually really powerful. You can even say if there's a power failure, it has 3 different presets. You can say, go back to, at a power failure, go back to 100%, go back to that. So you can predefine that in the settings. Now in the software, say, this is my default behavior if I have a power off situation. So it's very, very wonderful. And yes, you know, this whole situation, hotel room, 2 a.m., you don't want to learn a lighting system, it's a valid point. I think that really talks about the demography of the people. If you'd ask, like, my UX UI designer who's 25 and completely a diva, he's like, of course I like do my phone, like, what stupid idea. I don't want to go and find where the light switch is. I'm actually, as a lighting designer, have had multiple hotel rooms, plenty of hotel rooms where I can find the lighting switch, and it's my profession. It's very embarrassing that I don't know how to turn the light switch off in a hotel room sometimes. So yes, that's I think a good point. I think where's the technology really going? Maybe voice is going to be the solution for that, you know. It's just also a matter of what you're used to. You know, we're used to like finding somewhere next to the door the switch. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's in that little table lamp. It's like up there. Is it down there? Is it? You know, that's really preference, training. What are you used to? That's a whole different thing. But it's changing with technology. It's changing how we interact with the little devices around us. And sorry, one more point. I think where's really the power is where I'm really getting excited about. What happens if the hotel knows I'm sorry, Jennifer, you're checking in. We do know your preference when checking in is that you want to be welcomed with that dim light scene and that magical blue behind the bed. The technology can ultimately recognize your preferences and adopt to it accordingly, and I think that's really powerful. Or when you have your DigiKey, you know, Bluetooth, open up the door and the lights turn automatically on. That's also another kind of nice aspect. So lots of possibilities that we haven't even thought about.
Have you tried occupancy sensors like in the corridor project at all?
In the projects we showed, we haven't. In our office, we have played around with it, and I think it's gonna happen. You know, ultimately, there's a lot of power in that.
I just have a question about the fee structure. For the hotel project, you know, they'll have the license fee for the software. What is the range of the license fee, like $5,000?
It depends on how many lights you have and how you structure it. I think the fee structure is still all very fluent. I think we still are testing out where the market is. But typically you go by light point, or with some of the other applications, we might have a different price structure by controller. So it really depends, you know. And I have hotels, like I just had a PIT negotiation on Monday where we brought them a CapEx budget, and they're like, oh, we actually only have that budget. Can you put the license fee into a SaaS fee back so that we can start to do it in phases with the budget that we have allocated for this year? So it's, you know, it's still a fluid discussion. I think you'll offer different models for different clients. It depends on how the property is structured.
Just roughly, is $5,000 like medium size, medium size, or something?
You know, I think you're thinking the wrong terms. It depends on how many lights it is. If you're saying, is this $60 for a color changing light and I'm adding, I don't know, another $60 for a software license fee, then you're at a point of like 100, somewhere between 100 and 150. That's more like where you should be thinking of. How does $5,000 relate to what type of space, to how many lights? Is it color changing or dimming? It's a complete different situation. If I have a dimmable light and I buy something like the Philips Hue here, which you can buy for $15 to $20 for a dimmable light, and then you add a software fee, you can go a point maybe for $50 away, plus a little bit deployment time. So it's really a completely different thinking. You don't think in these pockets anymore. You think by light, what type of light, what kind of capabilities do you want, how many features do you want, and then you put a price per bulb in there, or light. Well, the moment you're doing that, you're gonna be limiting and you're gonna move away from the open protocol. I mean, like one of the big elephants has kind of done their own little proprietary range, but then you're ending up with a closed system again. So if you wanna have an open architecture, an open system, you're gonna go and deal with what the standard is. And then each standard has their own little set of, problems. Zigbee had now that signal range issue, but if I have a Bluetooth, I have also limitations which are in range a lot smaller. So every technology has their own little hurdles and challenges you need to address and find a solution to get over it. But if you're going into your own proprietary protocol again, you're not open. You're back to a closed system, and that will, close down all the possibilities, and then you're handcuffs to one manufacturer again. So it's kind of, not very conducive to where the world is going, basically. Yeah.
Well, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. I'm just curious. This technology is so exciting. It can be used for other loads in buildings besides lighting.
Yes.
In a cheap, lightweight, friendly way. Have you done any projects like that?
No, I'm specialized in lighting, and I'm trying to focus on one because that's already pretty comprehensive, fulfilling topic to capture the different protocols, working with the different manufacturers, teaching them how to deal with API, trying to define what the liabilities with, hardware, software situations are. We do know there are other people around. I mean, we talk about Nest, they're doing a fantastic job. So I think the technology is out there. It's going to happen. It's not a matter if it's happened, it's a matter of when, with who. And then I think, the world is about partnerships, you rather partner up with Nest than reinventing Nest, I don't want to be another Honeywell. Any other questions otherwise? Good, thank you very much. On the dot.